What's the most true story you know? Story 1, I met a girl when I was 25, and she was 22. We dated for 3 years and eventually got married. She was a very wonderful person, and I could not have asked for a better girlfriend. While we were planning the wedding, she mentioned that her ex-boyfriend offered to be the DJ for free. They had dated for 3 years, from when she was 15 to 18, and it had been a clean breakup. He was also married, so I really did not have a problem with it. I mean, free DJ service sounded great. When we got married and went to the reception, everyone was having a grand time. I was talking with a buddy of mine, and from the corner of my eye, I saw the DJ, her ex-boyfriend, staring at something. I looked over, and he was staring at my wife, who looked amazing, and my wife was staring back at him. I continued talking to my buddy but kept an eye on them. She was across the room, but they smiled at each other, and she started looking around the room. Probably for me, but I was well hidden. My wife walked toward the bathroom area, and the DJ asked his assistant to take over and started walking in the same direction. I started to panic inside. I excused myself and walked in that direction. I could not find either one. There were 3 bathrooms, one for men, one for women, and a family bathroom that locked from the inside. I went into the men's room, but no one was there. I waited for a few minutes, and the family bathroom door opened. My wife saw me and tried to get me to go dance, but I was not budging. The guy eventually came out a few minutes later, and my wife swore up and down that he was just helping her with her dress. I left. She called my phone and again swore that nothing happened. We talked about it the next day, but I could not grasp why she would need him, of all people, to help with that sort of thing. I was able to get an annulment. I never remarried. Story 2, I live in a small town and serve on the volunteer fire department. One night we received a call about a structure fire with children trapped inside. When we arrived, we found a badly burnt mother outside, the father unharmed, the house engulfed in flames, and a neighbor holding a child. The mother was screaming that her boys were still inside, 3 of them. We made entry and had the fire knocked down in 3 minutes. It was around 3 in the morning and hard to see anything since everything was burnt. We were feeling around the boys' bedroom when another firefighter felt something that made a noise. So he scooped it up and ran for the ambulance, thinking he had found a child still alive. When he got there, it turned out to be a burnt-up teddy bear with a noisemaker inside it. The father had sprayed them all with lighter fluid and lit the house on fire. The mother woke up and managed to save her daughter, but was badly burned when she went back in. The neighbor caught the father trying to put that child back in the window before we arrived. His excuse in court was that he did it for the insurance, even though it was a rental, and he had not paid his insurance premium in over a year. That night still haunts many of the guys on the department and the community as a whole. Story 3. When I was in high school, I dated a girl named Carolyn. Her previous boyfriend, Jamie, was involved in a very disturbing story. He and I already knew of each other and had talked a few times. He had 2 other friends who were bad news. There was also a girl named Melanie Ritchie who went to the Crosstown High School. She was super popular, and everyone loved her. She was maybe a sophomore and was a genuinely good person, always polite and doing the right thing. One night, Melanie decided to sneak out of her house and go to a party. Jamie and his 2 friends were there. One of the friends decided he wanted to hook up with Melanie. He spent most of the night following her around and trying to get her drunk. She resisted at first, but eventually gave in to the peer pressure. He had also been feeding her some kind of drugs, either ecstasy or LSD, but supposedly they were fake. She ended up getting very drunk, and he gave her something else before they all left together. She and this guy were in the back seat when she passed out. The guy panicked, believing Melanie was dead. They had no idea what to do with her, so they drove out into the woods. The guy decided he was going to have sex with her anyway, and did so on the hood of the car. They still believed she was dead and did not want to go to the authorities. The second guy, not Jamie, then had a brilliant idea. They would drag her down into a ravine, put a pipe bomb in her mouth to destroy her dental records, and just leave her out there in the middle of nowhere. Story 4. When I was a Cub Scout, we were hanging around unsupervised waiting for the Cub leader to show up. It was the 1970s, and standards of childcare were a bit different back then. There was a construction site nearby, and being foolish 8- and 9-year-old kids, we decided to play in it. We climbed into cement mixers and jumped into trenches. Then one kid decided to climb up onto a big pile of planks and jump off. He jumped off only about 4 feet down and landed on one end of a loose plank below. The plank had a 6-inch nail sticking out of the end, which completely pierced the middle of the kid's foot so it was sticking out of the top of his shoe. The force of him landing on it caused the other end of the plank to lever down violently on the uneven ground. And because his foot was impaled on the nail, it snapped his Achilles tendon. The other end of the plank levered up, smashed into his face, broke his nose, and knocked out all of his teeth. We did not see him for a while after that. Story 5. During the first year of our marriage, my wife and I went hiking and swimming at Fossil Springs in Arizona. Some random man was cliff jumping above us and, without warning, decided to jump off an area that nobody had ventured to before. The next thing I knew, I saw blue and white flashing. I saw my body being carried by 3 random heroes. And then I woke up in a hospital room with a 6-figure bill. Apparently, the man who jumped had dislodged some boulders. One in particular, about 65 pounds, found its way to my head. I was knocked into the water and floated up on my back, because I am a stubborn fighter with innate survival instincts. Bystanders helped me out of the water, while my wife could only watch in shock, believing her new husband might have just been paralyzed or worse. The man responsible fled as I explained that my back hurt. I was told that my head had been split open and that there was blood everywhere. 4 men carried me the 2 miles out, and some kind stranger put me in his truck and drove the 4-mile switchback road like a mad delivery driver racing a timer. I was put in an ambulance, then a helicopter, then into surgery. The result was a broken back with thoracic 2, 3, 4, and 5 compression fractures, which made me an inch shorter, along with a dent in my skull and a deep scar. The real pain came afterward, losing our car, ruining our credit because I could not work for months and having no insurance since I had just started a new job. We were left paying $100,000 in medical bills on top of everything that went to collections. Story 6. When I was working as a locksmith, I was called to change the locks on a house. I started the job with a coworker and everything was going smoothly. The woman who called us approached us mid-job and started chatting with my colleague. They were being friendly, and then she suddenly said, "Hey, want to see something strange?" Of course, my buddy said yes. I was not as eager, but I followed anyway. She led us to a bedroom, opened the door, and there was blood everywhere. The bed was soaked, the walls were covered with smeared handprints, and the floor was stained. It was all dry, not fresh. I realized that all the spots I had been seeing in the carpet, which I could barely distinguish because I am colorblind, were actually blood. It was all through the house, just not as heavy as in the bedroom. It was spotted on furniture and even on the walls in other rooms. She told us her brother had shot himself in that room that morning. Apparently he missed his brain and stumbled around the house before finally calling emergency services. They came and took him away. It turned out the house had belonged to their mother, who had passed away a year earlier. He had been living there, supposedly preparing it to sell, but all her belongings were still there. Pills, half-finished crochet projects, everything as if she still lived there with him. To make it even stranger, his girlfriend was the only person he would allow to visit him in the hospital. The sister suspected the girlfriend had talked him into shooting himself and believed she had a claim in his will to get the house. It was disturbing and unexpected. Later, I met a man at a bar who turned out to be one of the emergency medics who had picked him up. He told me the brother died the day after the incident. Small world. Story 7. My uncle's stepdaughter's house burned down, killing her and her sister. It was an accidental fire, but the truly disturbing part happened afterward. Anne and Joe were married with 2 children, one of whom was only a few months old. Anne's sister Christine was visiting, while her own husband and Joe went on a fishing trip. An electrical fire started around 5 in the morning. It seemed that Christine never woke up, but Anne managed to get her older child to run out of the house. However, Anne and the baby became trapped on the 2nd floor and eventually made it out onto the roof. A jogger happened to pass by at the perfect moment, and Anne dropped the baby to him. As she did, she lost her footing and fell, dying instantly. The baby suffered serious injuries from the fall and from smoke inhalation. The insurance company denied the medical claims because the policyholder, her mother, was deceased and the policy had ended at the time of death. My uncle had to work with doctors to prove that the baby sustained the injuries from the fall seconds before her mother died and the smoke inhalation minutes before. Only then did they honor the claim. Fortunately, my own stepfather, who worked in hospital administration, helped resolve the case. Story 8. I went to high school with this girl. We were in church youth group together and basically grew up side by side. Eventually, she had a few children by different men who were involved in drugs and ended up addicted to crack coca. One day, she drove to a drug house, brought her kids inside, and started a heavy drug session. Her infant began crying, as infants often do, and in a state of rage, she took the baby outside, wrapped a seatbelt around his neck, and strangled him. She then put him in his car seat, buckled him up as if nothing had happened, and went back inside to continue smoking. It was not until her older son told someone what he had seen that authorities were alerted. When they checked, they discovered the horrifying truth. She is now in prison for life, and from what I last heard, in protective segregation because other inmates attacked her constantly. Story 9. My friend lived with his grandmother, uncle, and father. His mother was in jail on drug charges. One day after school, his father met us on the way home and told us his uncle had shot his grandmother and then turned the gun on himself. It was a murder-suicide. The following weeks were incredibly hard. Another uncle had to move into the house, bullet holes still in the walls to help cover rent, while the father tried to decide what to do with the place. During that time, my friend's mother was released from prison and tried to get back into his life, even attempting to break into the home. She was stopped and stayed away for a while, but my friend eventually lost the house anyway. We came home from school one day to find police there again. The uncle who had moved in was arrested for dealing drugs, and my friend's father lost the home. They moved into a trailer together, and somehow my friend managed to keep living a normal life. He still lives with his dad and is doing well now, though his mother is still out of the picture. It is unbelievable how much one person can endure. Story 10. Years ago, I was drunk at Wisconsin Dells for spring break. At the time, I lived with a girl who was known for partying. Everyone on the trip were just acquaintances. I only really knew her and two other girls. There were about 22 of us total, mostly men. The first night, I got very drunk and ended up passing out in what I thought was an empty hotel room while everyone else went to the water parks. In my sleep, I started having trouble breathing. I slowly realized why someone's body was on me. When I managed to open my eyes slightly, I heard my name being said and understood that what was happening was real. The room was completely dark, and I could not make out who it was. I tried to move away, but he grabbed me and forced himself on me. I tried to say no, saying that it hurt and to stop, but he did not. I was still too intoxicated and weak to fight properly. When it was finally over, I stumbled off the bed and tripped over someone else lying on the floor. Another man had been there the whole time. I locked myself in the bathroom, terrified and not knowing what to do. You always hear about situations like this, but living it is completely different. Later that night, I told one of the girls what had happened, though I still did not know who it was. I tried to push it out of my mind and finish the trip, but when we got back to school, rumors spread fast. I walked into the cafeteria, and people were pointing and yelling terrible things at me. Teachers confronted me, including the school nurse. I learned that another girl from the trip had been assaulted the same night by the same person. I know I should have gone to the police, but I was 16, drunk, scared, and far from home. I just wanted to forget. Later, I told my mother, even though we did not have a good relationship, I was desperate to tell someone. All she said was that it was a consequence of drinking. Nothing was ever done, and many people in my hometown still believe lies about me. But I moved away, and I know who I am. I know I did nothing wrong. I never received an apology from the one who did it, but I have learned to accept it and move on. It still affects my relationship with my partner at times, but things have been getting better. It was a painful experience, but sharing it helps me heal. Story 11. About 20 years ago, I worked with a carpentry crew that built new houses and did remodels. We got a job to remodel an attic in a 2-story home. On the first day, the homeowner told us he would be leaving for work, and that if we needed to use the restroom, there was one in the basement. He said, just go down into the basement, and at the end of the hallway, you will see the bathroom on the right. We started working, some of us outside, some in the attic. Eventually, one of the guys needed to use the restroom. He went downstairs, stayed for a few minutes, and came back up looking pale, like he had seen a ghost. Everyone noticed something was off. He asked if anyone else had been downstairs yet. Nobody had, and now we were all curious. He said he wasn't sure what was going on, but something definitely didn't feel normal. A while later, another guy went down to use the bathroom and came back up just as uneasy. The two of them started whispering about what they had seen. Curiosity got the better of us, so a few of us went downstairs together. At the bottom of the stairs was a small room with chairs all around the walls, like a waiting room at a doctor's office. Then we went down the hallway and saw rooms on both sides. No doors, just curtains covering the doorways. Each room had a waist-high table about 6 feet long. We noticed water spigots in the walls and even a full-face respirator mask, the kind firefighters use. We were all more than a little freaked out and went back upstairs. Throughout the day, each time someone went down there, they noticed new strange details. The final clue came when one of the guys found a corkboard in the waiting room pinned with handwritten recipes for homemade colon enemas. That's when it hit us. The homeowner was running a homemade colon cleansing operation out of his basement. Story 12, I once went to a small rural high school where, during freshman year, a new student named Nick Martin transferred from Philadelphia. Growing up in an urban area had made Nick believe he was, in his words, gangsterhood. He was a small white kid who wore oversized white t-shirts and baggy pants. He wanted to be a rapper and called himself Enmar. Without irony, he would challenge other students to rap battles to settle his arguments. Naturally, he was mocked constantly. Sometime after freshman year, he disappeared from school. Rumors spread that he had gotten into a violent fight with his father and been sent to a juvenile detention center. That was confirmed when, during junior year, he escaped and was on the run for a while. Then everyone forgot about him. Years later, during my senior year of college, I heard his name again. He was still in my hometown, now a 22-year-old addicted to meth and other drugs, dating a 17-year-old girl who was also struggling with addiction. One night, after an argument, he stabbed her to death with a screwdriver in his living room. He then took her unclothed body, put it in a garbage bag, loaded it into his pickup truck, and dumped it about 10 miles out of town in a marsh where locals usually disposed of deer carcasses. He left her body among them. The next day, he bragged about it to a friend over beers, and that friend turned him in. Police found her body, blood in his carpet, and a muddy shovel in his truck. He is now serving a life sentence for murder. Enmar turned out to be far more dangerous than anyone ever imagined. Story 13. I went on vacation to a very secluded town in Oregon to visit family and see their restaurant. It was such a small town that my aunt knew everyone who walked through her door. I helped her at the register one day. Each time someone came in, she greeted them warmly, then turned to me after they left and made a blunt remark about them. It was hilarious. A man walked in, she leaned over and said, "He's a dirty old scumbag." Then a mother and her adult child came in for beer. "They do that every day," she said. "Sometimes they collect enough cans to buy exactly 2 Bud Lights." I was entertained by her quick, candid observations. But then a little girl came in. My aunt greeted her, encouraging her to stay in school. The girl immediately replied that school was for idiots and said she planned to marry someone rich and take their money. Her tone was unsettling, cold, and emotionless. She bought a popsicle and left. Then my aunt, without missing a beat, said, "She saw her mother hang herself." I said nothing as my aunt went on to explain that the girl's mother had witnessed her own mother suicide, and years later, her father had tried to kill her and her siblings by leaving them on train tracks. It was horrifying. Now the little girl constantly talked about using people for money, how everything was pointless, and that she didn't plan to live past 25. She was only about 13. It wasn't the craziest story, but it made me appreciate my own slightly dysfunctional yet safe family. Story 14. As a child, I did not have a good childhood. My parents fought constantly. We were what people called trailer trash, literally living on the wrong side of the tracks in a small, rough town in Canada. We got lice, lived off food bank donations, and had one careless babysitter after another because both of my parents worked and drank. My father was, and still is, an alcoholic. He also loved woodworking, and his makeshift workshop was built across the hallway from my room in our trailer. I was about 5 years old, a little girl sick with the flu, and my mother told me to stay in bed. While lying there, I had an accident and soiled myself. Being 5, I cried for my mother. I heard my father in his shop yelling at her to shut that kid up. My mother never came. My father came into the room and found me in bed covered in feces. He got angrier and angrier as I cried. He smelled like alcohol and his voice grew sharper. He told me to shut up or he'd give me a reason to cry. But I could not stop crying. I was sick, filthy, and scared. He stormed in again, took the soiled sheet, and shoved it in my face. Then he made me eat it. He left the sheet over my face and slammed the door as he left. My mother finally came in and asked him why he had not cleaned it up. At 5 years old, that was the day I truly learned what kind of people my parents were. Story 15. This is about an old manager of mine, and it happened while I was still working for him. He had been in a relationship for about 10 years with a woman who had 2 children. He was a father figure to them, and they all seemed happy. Before they met, she had worked as a dental hygienist at a nearby prison, treating inmates. During that time, she met and fell in love with one of her patients, a man imprisoned for the rape and murder of a 16-year-old girl. Years later, after his release, that man went to find her. She broke up with my manager, kicked him out, and moved the man in. They lived together for about 6 months. During that time, he began threatening violence toward her 16-year-old daughter. The mother ignored it, so the daughter left and went to live with my manager. 2 months later, the man murdered the woman, stole her car, and crashed it, killing himself in the process. Her 8-year-old son found her body in the laundry room, hidden under a pile of dirty towels. The boy now lives with my former manager, the only real father figure he has left. Story 16. A few years ago, my father married a woman who was deeply unstable. After their divorce, he finally told me the truth about what had really happened to her cat that supposedly ran away. The woman, who I will call PB, hated that cat. The cat had originally been a gift to her daughter from PB's ex-husband, but by the time of this story, she was just a calm, overweight cat who liked to hide. PB had her declawed because she did not want her scratching the curtains, and the cat also had asthma, so she was mostly inactive. PB constantly complained about the smell of the litter box and said the cat needed to be an outdoor cat, so she began leaving the back door open. But the cat never went outside. She knew she was safe indoors. One day we came home from school, and PB was acting strangely, claiming the cat had run away. I did not believe it, but assumed she might have given her away. 2 years later, my father finally confessed the truth. PB had called him, saying he needed to dispose of the cat's body because there had been an accident. When he arrived, it was clear this was no accident. PB told him that the cat had made her angry and she had lost control. She had taken engine cleaner and sprayed it down the cat's throat. My father said the cat's body looked mangled, her fur stiff and twisted, and there was no doubt it was deliberate. That woman murdered a defenseless, gentle cat who had done nothing but exist. Story 17. I am using a throwaway account for this for reasons that will be obvious. I have also changed everyone's names. Back in high school, I had some very colorful friends. One of them, whom I will call Bill, was deep into drugs, mostly selling them. He was in and out of juvenile detention frequently. Another friend, James, had distant family connections to people involved with labor unions. Then there was me. Let's call me Guy. I got into fights with local gangs, and the 3 of us made a pact. If any of us ever called for help, the others would come, no questions asked. After high school, we stayed in touch, but went our separate ways for a while. I went to college but dropped out after a year. Bill kept dealing, and James got married, moved away, and eventually came back. After his divorce, he became a bondsman. I joined him after going through my own personal struggles, including an assault that left me angry and bitter when the law refused to recognize that a woman could assault a man. The work as a bondsman was rough and gave me post-traumatic stress from the things I had to deal with. We often joked that sooner or later, Bill would end up on our docket. Then one day we got a call from Bill. He said he wanted out of the drug business and had turned in some dealers to the police. He was leaving town and told us he would reach out if he needed help. 3 weeks passed with no word. James grew restless, and I was still trying to keep my own emotions in check. Then the call came. It was Bill. He sounded terrified. He said he had taken peyote, blacked out, and woken up 4 states away. He begged us to meet him halfway at a gas station in a small town. When we asked when, he said, "Right now. Just get here." We geared up and took James's car since it was the better one. We stopped at a gas station where they knew us, so they would not panic at the sight of 2 men in body armor with guns. We stocked up on energy drinks and hit the road, barely speaking for hours except to mention food or gas. At each stop, we told attendants we were law enforcement close enough and paid cash. James told me to wear his spare gun and extra magazines, since I carried only a revolver. When we arrived, Bill was there with a red Mustang that was not his. He told us he had woken up in a rundown motel with the car keys in his pants pocket, surrounded by strangers who were all high. Then he opened the trunk, and what we saw looked like something out of a movie. A briefcase full of money. He said he had no idea where it came from. So people would not get suspicious, we handcuffed him, put him in our car, and locked the money in the trunk. After we got far enough away, we released him. He offered us some of the money, but we refused, assuming it was dirty. When we got back home, he reported it as casino winnings, paid taxes on it, and used the rest to go to college. He eventually became a chef, finally living his dream. James remarried and moved around with his new wife, who was in the military. As for me, I went back to college, earned a degree in computer networking that ended up being useless, spent 6 years working in call centers, and now I sell cars for James's father. Such is life. Story 18. In the neighborhood next to mine, a woman named Darlie Rucher murdered her 2 sons, 6-year-old Devin and 5-year-old Damon, while her husband and 7-month-old baby Drake slept upstairs. She claimed that an intruder had broken in, stabbed the boys, and escaped, all while she somehow slept through the attack. My father, who once volunteered with local law enforcement, got to see the photos and reports from the case. He said that Darlie stabbed one of her sons with such force and rage that the knife not only went through his small body, but embedded itself half an inch into the concrete floor beneath the carpet. What made it even more disturbing was what happened after. Just 8 days after the murders, Darlie and her family held a birthday party at the boys' graves to celebrate what would have been Devin's 7th birthday. Darlie, wearing a tiny shirt and shorts, smiled and laughed as she sprayed silly string on their graves and sang "Happy Birthday to You." The footage shocked the entire country. As of 2014, she remains on death row, awaiting execution by lethal injection. Some people are truly beyond understanding. Story 19. I was dating a girl I worked with a few years ago. One day she stopped answering my calls and texts, and I started panicking, wondering what I had done wrong. I was depressed and angry that she had just disappeared. After about a week, I finally got in touch with one of her friends and found out what had happened. The girl I was dating had fallen into a deep depression after her ex-boyfriend and best friend were killed by the police. The story behind it was horrifying. Her ex had been pulled over for not having license plates on his car, a simple violation that normally just earns a fine and a warning. But when the officer looked inside the car, he saw a pipe. That discovery led to a deeper search. They soon found that a car matching his vehicle's description had been involved in a gas station drive-off. It turned out that wasn't his car, but the police didn't realize that until later. They kept adding charges, and he began to panic because he had been drinking and using coca. As the officers were placing him in the squad car, he started spitting at them. One of the officers grabbed what he thought was a spit mask, a mesh restraint used for detainees who spit. But it turned out to be a biohazard mask that needed to be connected to an air source to allow breathing. The officers didn't realize it, and when they secured it on him, he suffocated in the back of the police car. Story 20. I am a rock climber, and there is a local crag near the edge of a rough part of town. People often drink at the top, spray graffiti on the rocks, smash bottles, and sometimes even camp out in the woods nearby. Despite that, the climbing is decent. So when we can't spend a full day outdoors, we occasionally go there for a quick climb. Every time someone goes, they come back with a story, usually about bottles or garbage being thrown at them while climbing, or their equipment being vandalized. But the worst story I ever heard was about a group that went top roping one afternoon. The climber's rope ran through an anchor at the top of the cliff, about 80 to 100 feet high. He was halfway up when the rope suddenly flew past him, over his shoulder. Someone at the top had cut it and walked away. He was 50 feet off the ground when it happened. Miraculously, he managed to stay calm, finish the climb, and reach the top safely before hiking back down. The sheer disregard for another person's life still makes my blood boil every time I think about it. Story 21. My old roommate once told me about a cousin of his in Michigan. The cousin went to Detroit one night looking for meth. He knew he would probably be robbed, so he brought pocket money along with the money he planned to use for drugs. As expected, he was robbed at the door of an apartment building, pocket money gone, but he still had enough left for the meth. He made his purchase without any trouble and started to leave the building. On his way out, he passed an open apartment door and happened to glance inside. He froze when he realized what he was seeing. 3 to 5 men in the room, and at least 2 of them were having intercourse with what he described as a female corpse. According to him, there was no movement, and her skin was taking on a purple hue. He kept walking, afraid to say or do anything. He had gotten what he came for, and he knew better than to linger in a place like that. Story 22. One of my friends has probably destroyed one of his closest friends' life. They met at work around the age of 18. He thought she was cute while she fell completely in love with him. They started seeing each other secretly, hooking up at parties without anyone knowing. He, however, only wanted casual encounters and kept pursuing other girls. At one point, he even had a girlfriend while still seeing her on the side. When that relationship ended, they continued hooking up, spending nearly every night together. To everyone else, it looked like they were finally in a real relationship. But behind closed doors, he constantly degraded her. He told her they would never be together, that she was only a hookup. If she gave any attention to another man, he became jealous and possessive, only to pull away again once he got her attention. He sent just enough drunken, late-night texts to keep her emotionally attached. After about 3 years, she got pregnant. He pressured her into an abortion, saying it would ruin his life and that he would never want to be with her. She went through with it, and things went back to the same toxic routine. For nearly 6 more years, she came over whenever he called, did his laundry, and left when he told her to. The entire friend group knew and thought she was crazy for allowing it, but nobody held him accountable. He was too charming for that. Now they are 28, and he has started dating her best friend. She is heartbroken and doesn't know what to do. When another man recently expressed interest in her, my friend told him not to pursue her because he wouldn't feel comfortable. He said this while dating her best friend. It might not be the most horrific story to some, but it's one of the most emotionally damaging situations I've ever witnessed. She lost her entire 20s, living in his shadow, convinced she was worthless without him. She carried the pain of the abortion and the years of manipulation alone. I can only imagine the deep psychological scars she'll carry for the rest of her life. Story 23. I worked as an emergency medical technician in a major United States city for a while. One day, we received a call about a man in respiratory distress at a motel. When we arrived, we found a thin man in his underwear screaming, and a man weighing over 300 pounds lying naked on the floor on top of a tarp, completely covered in baby oil. We had to call the fire department to help us move him. The firefighters coated him in rubbing alcohol and wrapped him in blankets so we could lift him onto the stretcher. But he was so slippery that he slid off in the hallway, and we had to do it all over again. Eventually, we got him to the hospital, but he died later that evening. What we learned afterward was tragic and bizarre. The deceased man had told his wife and children that he was going on a business trip, but instead he flew to another state to meet a man he had met online. His particular fetish involved taking a sleeping medication and then engaging in explicit acts while unconscious. There was video evidence proving it was consensual. However, this time, he accidentally inhaled some of the baby oil, which entered his lungs and clogged his alveoli, suffocating him. I will never forget how tense it was deciding who would have to call his wife and explain how he had actually died. Story 24. In high school, I knew a girl, let's call her M. She was friendly, had plenty of friends, and we were close for a while. I even had feelings for her at one point. We used to talk on Instant Messenger all the time, back when everyone used AOL Instant Messenger. Through her, I met her cousin, Jay. He was older, preppy, and had that early 2000s Hollister look-frosted tips, nice clothes, confident attitude. He seemed friendly, and we talked on and off for a few years. Later, M met one of my ex-girlfriends, A, through a random chat session online. A and J became close, and over the next 8 years, they developed a deep friendship. At least that's what A thought. They messaged constantly through MySpace and later Facebook. A told Jay everything about her life, her struggles, her relationships, her emotions. Jay shared stories too, his arrests, his travels, even that he had once forced his girlfriend to have an abortion. He said that if he ever settled down, it would be with A. They had never met in person, but A considered Jay her best friend. She even interacted regularly with Jay's friends online, each with their own social media profiles and personalities. Years passed, and I eventually lost touch with M. One day I remembered something strange. Back before MySpace became popular, there was a blogging site called Zanga where we all kept online journals. Once, Jay had commented on one of my posts, but it appeared under M's username. Then moments later, Jay's account commented saying that M had just been at his house and forgotten to log out. But they didn't live anywhere near each other. At the time, I hadn't thought much of it. Years later, that memory suddenly clicked. I texted an old friend to get M's number, then asked A for Jay's number. When A sent it to me, I compared them, and they were identical. M and Jay's phone numbers were the same. My stomach dropped. I messaged M, pretending I had meant to text Jay but had sent it to her number by mistake. She immediately realized she was caught. She confessed everything. M had created Jay's identity years earlier using photos she had stolen from a random MySpace user. She had fabricated Jay's entire world, his friends, his family, his relationships, all using fake profiles. For 8 years, she had maintained this lie, manipulating A into believing she had a best friend who did not exist. I took screenshots of M's confession and sent them to A. She was devastated and in disbelief. When she tried to reach Jay, there was no response. I met up with her afterward, and she was completely broken. Even today, she still struggles to trust people. Catfishing someone for a few weeks or months is cruel enough, but creating an entire fake world for 8 years purely out of manipulation and boredom is beyond comprehension. I still feel guilty for being the one who exposed it all, but I also know that if I were her, I would have wanted the truth. Story 25. My father was in the military when I was born. He was stationed near Tacoma, Washington, which is where I was born. One day during training exercises, he and a buddy of his, let's call him Joe, dug a foxhole together. Somehow, orders got mixed up, and tanks were rolling over the area where the soldiers had dug in. Joe kept poking his head out of the hole to see what was happening, and my father kept yelling at him to stay down, or he was going to get run over. The last time Joe lifted his head, a white phosphorus bomb struck him in the stomach. He fell back into the foxhole, screaming, trying to hold his intestines in his hands while the phosphorus continued to burn through his body. My father tried to help him, but the burning chemical ate through his gloves and scorched his skin. Joe died there in that foxhole. My father was given an honorable discharge not long after. I learned about this when I was older, because I witnessed one of his post-traumatic stress attacks. He would try to crawl under tables, the porch, or anything he could find, screaming at Joe to stay down and yelling that his hands were on fire. I have searched for information about this incident, but could never find anything. I suppose it's one of those tragedies the military prefers to keep quiet. Story 26. A friend of mine once told me about his old housemate who completely lost his mind. The man had been going through some rough times, and his behavior became increasingly disturbing. It started when he defecated in the shower, which the others tried to excuse as an accident caused by stress. But things escalated quickly. While my friend and another housemate went on a week-long trip, the unstable man stayed home. When they returned with new friends from their trip, they found that the bathroom walls were smeared with feces. Everyone was disgusted and left immediately, but the man continued living there for the remainder of the lease. When the time finally came to move out, they discovered several makeshift objects he had been using as Sewell tools covered in filth. Among them was a can opener with a handle that was vaguely shaped like a phallus. It was one of the most revolting discoveries they had ever made. Story 27. For a criminal justice class, I once researched a gruesome murder case from my hometown in Utah. Three men decided to rob a home audio store. They drove a van to the back alley and forced their way inside, taking the employees and a customer hostage in the basement while they looted the store. During the robbery, two more people, relatives of the employees, arrived to pick them up after their shift. The robbers captured them as well. Once they had taken everything, they decided to kill their captives. They forced them to drink drain cleaner, imitating something they had seen in a movie. But when that didn't work, they shot each of them execution style. One of the women was assaulted multiple times before being shot in the head. Miraculously, one of the victims bound, forced to drink the poison, shot in the head, and stabbed in the ear with a pen survived. Out of 5 hostages, 2 lived to tell the story. The perpetrators were caught soon after, and 2 of them were sentenced to death. Story 28. My hometown is small, and my family moved away when I was around 4 years old. Years later, my brother returned there to attend junior college. While he was living there, a woman who lived down the street from the school was murdered in her home. She had 2 young children and a husband who traveled often. He was involved in a gang, and in that group, it was common for members to stay at one another's homes when passing through town. While he was away, another gang member stayed at their house for about a week. One night, he decapitated the woman while her 2 children hid in a closet and watched in terror. Afterward, he fled. The children ran to a neighbor's house for help, and the police were called. The killer was never caught. For months afterward, groups of gang members came into town pretending to make casual conversation, trying to find out who knew where he had gone. To this day, the house remains abandoned. Every time I go back, I drive past it, a dark, overgrown place surrounded by neat, well-kept homes. Occasionally, local Boy Scouts volunteer to mow the lawn and trim the bushes, trying to make the neighborhood feel a little less haunted by what happened there. Story 29. This one is more funny than dark, but it still makes me laugh when I think about it. One day, my next-door neighbor in the dorms came into my room and asked to borrow $25. He said he needed $50 to buy medication to treat an infection he had caught, but he only had half the cash. I asked why he couldn't just use his credit card, and he said his parents closely monitored all his transactions. Then came the best part, how he caught it. He had met a girl on a dating site, and after a night of heavy drinking, ended up sleeping with her. When the alcohol wore off midway through, he realized she wasn't nearly as attractive as he thought. He lost his erection, the condom slipped off, and there was a brief, unprotected moment before he pulled away. Unfortunately, that was all it took. To make matters worse, the condom stayed inside her for a while before she managed to remove it. He ended up broke, embarrassed, and learning a very painful lesson about judgment in beer goggles. Story 30. When I was 7 years old, my dad took me fishing near our summer house by the sea. The water was calm, and we'd been there for a while when I started to get bored. I told him I was heading back home while he stayed to keep fishing. As I climbed over the rocks toward the footpath, about 10 feet behind him, I brushed my hair back from my face. At that exact moment, my dad swung his rod backward to cast, and the hook caught my hand. My dad was a big man, 6'4", and the pull lifted me clean off my feet. The hook had gone straight through my hand. To get it out, he had to push it through the other side, cut off the barb, and slide it back out. It was painful and horrifying to watch at 7 years old. But when I think about it now, that hook would have hit me in the face or worse, my eye, if it hadn't caught my hand first. As awful as it was, that accident probably saved me from something much worse. Story 31. Police once found the burned remains of a young girl near railroad tracks. They also discovered a diaper at the scene, which made them fear a baby had been involved. Years later, another body was found, this time inside a cardboard box thrown off an overpass. The authorities released facial sketches, but no one came forward with information. About 20 years later, a woman called in claiming to know exactly what happened. She said the 2 victims were her sisters and that their own mother had killed them. The woman explained that their mother had been abusive for years, favoring her 2 sons and cruelly tormenting the daughters. One day she shot the eldest girl. Refusing to take her to the hospital, she made her lie on the bathroom floor, bleeding and in agony. The children were forbidden to help her. They had to step over her as if nothing had happened. Miraculously, the girl survived. When she turned 18, she begged to move out. Her mother agreed, but only if she let her remove the bullet so she couldn't report what happened. Desperate to leave, she agreed. The mother used a kitchen knife to cut her open. The wound became infected, and the girl grew weaker each day. They put her in diapers because she could no longer move or use the bathroom. Eventually, she died, and her family burned her body by the railroad tracks. The first body police found. The second victim, another sister, was locked in a linen closet for days without food or water. At first, the family could hear her crying for help, but eventually the sound stopped, and then the smell began. When they opened the closet, she was dead. They placed her body in a box and threw it from an overpass. The woman who called the police survived and finally broke her silence. Their mother was sentenced to life in prison, while the brothers, who had helped conceal the crimes, served short sentences before being released in the early 2000s. It's one of the most horrific family tragedies I've ever heard of, and the house where it all happened still haunts those who know the story. Story 32. My fiance's roommate once lived through something that still shocks me to this day. A few years ago, her family was in the public eye after her sister was allegedly murdered by a group of people involved in some disturbing cult-like activity. I won't share identifying details, but the story was national news for a while. Despite everything, this girl, my fiance's roommate, is one of the strongest people I've ever met. She's a nursing student now, and last semester she was taking a psychology class. One day during a lecture on psychological disorders and abnormal behavior, the professor pulled up a case study for discussion. It was an article about her sister's murder. She sat there in silence, frozen, as her classmates analyzed the event like it was just another tragic case study. No one realized who she was. I can't imagine what it must have felt like to sit there listening to strangers discuss your own family's trauma. Yet somehow, despite all of this, she remains one of the kindest, funniest, and most positive people I've ever met. Her strength honestly amazes me. Story 33. One of my cousins was just 14 when this happened. He worked as a motoconcho, which is basically a motorcycle taxi. His older brother, who had a job at a 5-star hotel, was dating a woman. One day, my younger cousin saw that woman with another man. Shocked, he rode straight to our house and told us what he'd seen. He wanted to call his brother, but he didn't have a phone, so he borrowed my mother's. His brother never answered. My cousin grew nervous, got back on his bike, and left. That was the last time anyone saw him alive. The next afternoon, his body was found. His throat had been slashed wide open, apparently with a kitchen knife. The story that spread through town was that the girlfriend wanted to scare him into keeping quiet about what he saw. She and a few of her friends supposedly hired him to give them a ride, then forced him into a remote area. Things escalated, and they ended up killing him. Everyone in town knew who was responsible, but no one was ever arrested. It's the kind of story that sticks with you forever, the kind that makes you realize just how quickly innocence can be destroyed by other people's cruelty. Story 34. A few years back, my brother's friend bought a car from me. A few months later, that same car was found parked at the local fairgrounds with his body inside. He had gone there to make a drug deal. The buyer, an 18-year-old kid, seemed sketchy, so my brother's friend backed out of the deal and went back to his car. As he tried to drive away, the kid pulled out a shotgun and shot him 3 times in the chest. He stole the drugs and fled, leaving my brother's friend dead inside the car. The body sat there for 3 days before someone found it. Eventually, the killer was caught after his girlfriend told the police that he had confessed. During his time in jail awaiting trial, he offered his cellmate money to kill his girlfriend so she couldn't testify against him. The cellmate reported it to the authorities immediately. The whole thing was just horrifying. 2 young lives destroyed, all because of greed and stupidity. My brother's friend was only 19. The killer was barely 18. It's a tragedy that still feels senseless, no matter how many times I think about it. Story 35, I started with OxyContin. My girlfriend at the time was already doing it with one of my pot dealers, spending less and less time with me. I figured maybe if I joined her, she'd stay with me instead of him. For a while it worked until I ran out of money. Then she went right back to him. I began by snorting it, and it didn't take long before I was addicted. She'd been hooked for months before I even started. Eventually, we broke up after she cheated on me multiple times, but we still got high together often. The guy she was getting it from, my dealer, had 2 types of blood cancer from playing with chemicals as a kid. He was prescribed OxyContin and a drug called Neupogen, which came in glass syringes. As his tolerance rose, so did his pain, and he started injecting the oxy. It wasn't long before my ex began doing the same, and, of course, I followed. It felt stronger, cheaper, and more efficient. For a while, that was life. Then she got with another guy who also sold it, and all of us were shooting up daily. Then the city police did a massive coordinated raid on all the local oxy dealers. Overnight, supply vanished. The pills that used to cost $80 shot up to over $200 each, if you could even find one. Most of us needed at least 80 milligrams a day just to stay functional. It was impossible to keep up. That's when Hero arrived. A few people started bringing it in, and within 2 weeks, everyone switched over. The problem with Hero is you never know the strength. One batch might be weak, another could kill you with a single hit, and it doesn't last as long. So you need more, faster. All of us were hustling, stealing, lying, whatever it took to get by. My ex eventually had 2 kids with another addict, both born dependent on Hero and crack. The second baby was premature, born after doctors performed open-heart surgery to replace her infected valve with a pig's valve. My ex had already suffered a stroke. The kids were neglected, dirty, unwashed, and living out of a truck most of the time. The youngest developed MRSA from poor hygiene. For a while, I let them all stay in my tiny 400-square-foot condo just so they'd keep me supplied. It was miserable. Eventually, she got court-ordered rehab. One Friday night, she ran away from the facility and showed up at my place just 2 blocks away. I let her crash for the weekend on the condition she'd return Monday. We partied a little, drinking, smoking weed, taking Xanax, but we didn't touch Hero. She promised she was done. Sunday night, I fell asleep around 11. Around 2:30, I woke up and couldn't find her. The bathroom door was shut. I tried the handle locked. I forced it open and found her on the floor in a puddle of vomit. My phone ruined beside her, a needle and spoon next to her body. Her lips were purple, her skin clammy. I tried CPR, but all I heard were gurgles. I ran outside for help, tossing the needle and spoon in a dumpster on the way. Someone lent me a phone to call 911. The paramedics arrived and tried everything before pronouncing her dead. The cops took me in for questioning. I sat there for 6 hours before they released me. When I came home, there was a huge puddle of her blood on my living room floor from where the compression machine had burst her skin during resuscitation. I called work and told them I wasn't coming in. Later, I was arrested for tampering with evidence because I'd thrown away the needle and spoon. I spent $14,000 on legal fees and got 3 years of felony probation instead of prison. That night was the last time I ever touched Hero. I've been clean for 5 years, 8 months, and 17 days. Life is good now, but it took losing my best friend to realize how deep I had fallen. Story 36, I have a classmate, let's call him Carl, who's known for partying hard every weekend. Every Monday, he comes to school bragging about his wild adventures, but one story from this spring still shocks everyone who heard it. It was a hot, humid weekend perfect for heavy drinking. Carl, another classmate named Jörg, and a few friends were out at a party like usual. As the night wore on, most people left, leaving just a handful of them still drinking. They decided to head into town to meet up with more friends, carrying a 2-liter bottle of what Carl thought was Coca-Cola. What he didn't know was that the bottle was filled with pure vodka. His friends, drunk and reckless, handed it to him, pretending it was soda. Carl, already heavily intoxicated and incredibly thirsty, chugged the entire 2 liters in about 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Shortly after, he started feeling violently ill. His so-called friends barely paid attention and even got on another bus, leaving him behind as he collapsed on the ground, vomiting blood-pure blood. Not even alcohol. Fortunately, bystanders noticed and called an ambulance. Carl was lucky he was close to a hospital. Doctors later said his stomach had literally burst, spilling alcohol and stomach acid into his body. The only reason he survived was because he worked out constantly, sometimes 10 hours a day, which gave his body enough resilience to endure the trauma. It's horrifying to think how easily it could have ended differently, and all because of a stupid prank. Story 37. When my father was younger, he worked as a cameraman for a local news station in North Carolina. One afternoon, he was listening to the police scanner when he heard a call about an incident at a Piggly Wiggly grocery store nearby. He grabbed his camera and rushed to the scene, arriving before the police. Inside the manager's office, he found a man and a woman riddled with bullets, lying lifeless on the floor. Sitting calmly at the desk beside a homemade .50 caliber machine gun was another man, smoking a cigarette. My father froze as the man looked up and said something like, "Don't worry, I've already killed who I came for." He made no move to harm my dad. When police arrived, they discovered that the shooter had spent years building that massive weapon by hand. The victims were his wife, or possibly girlfriend, and her lover. All three worked together at that grocery store. Even though my father didn't get hurt, the image of that quiet, eerie scene stuck with him. To this day, he says he can't walk into a Piggly Wiggly without feeling uneasy. Story 38. When my mom was a child around 10 or 11, her mother became pregnant with twins. They were born prematurely and didn't survive. The loss broke my grandmother. She had always been a loving, stable parent until that tragedy. Afterwards, something inside her snapped. She became abusive, both emotionally and physically, blaming my mom for the twins' deaths. She grew fanatically religious and became convinced that my mom was possessed by evil. She even arranged for a priest to perform an exorcism, during which my mom's arm was broken. My grandmother told her over and over that she wished my mom had never been born. It left deep scars. When my mom grew up, she fell into a pattern of abusive relationships. One man, who called himself Qassar, was the worst. He was from Afghanistan and deeply controlling, violent, and delusional. When my mom was pregnant with my half-brother, he broke into our apartment one night and waited in the dark for her to come home, just to terrify her. He beat her multiple times, even while she was pregnant, cracking her front teeth. After my brother was born, he threatened to kidnap me. I was 6, and sell me as a child bride in Afghanistan, saying I'd be worth even more because I was white. Later, my mom found out he was wanted by the FBI for terrorist activities. She changed both her name and my brother's, while I went to live with my dad for safety. For years afterward, he sent her threatening messages, promising revenge. She was even advised to move out of state, but she stayed close to me instead. Even now, she still jumps whenever an unknown number calls. That fear never fully goes away, but she's the strongest person I know for surviving all of it. Story 39. I used to work the night shift at Walmart, and you see all kinds of strange people at 3 in the morning. Stoners, drunks, the occasional escort. But one man stood out. He came in quietly, buying only a pair of shoes and some socks. That's not a big deal during the day, but at that hour it was strange. Usually late-night customers buy cigarettes, snacks, or alcohol. What caught my attention was that he wasn't wearing any shoes at all. I made small talk, and he explained why. He worked as a tow truck driver and had just come from a terrible accident scene. A drunk driver had crashed into a bridge at full speed, and the impact had been so violent that the man was, well, everywhere. My customer said when he walked across the road, the ground squished. At one point, he bent down to pick something up, thinking it was debris, and realized it was the man's severed hand. When he finished clearing the wreck and went back to his truck, he couldn't bear to wear his blood-soaked shoes inside, so he threw them away. That night, he was just replacing them. I still remember how pale he looked. If anyone ever needed a drink past midnight, it was that guy. Story 40. During my 3rd year of medical school, while rotating through obstetrics and gynecology at a county hospital, all the students on the rotation received an urgent email. It said we were to attend a mandatory meeting the next morning, excused from all clinical duties. When we arrived, the clerkship director addressed us in a somber tone. She said that what had happened the day before was deeply disturbing and that anyone emotionally affected could seek psychological support or time off without penalty, but she didn't tell us what had happened. The next day, one of my classmates told me the story. A woman had come into the emergency room during what appeared to be a psychotic episode. She was screaming that a monster was inside her and begged doctors to remove it. When they examined her, they discovered she was pregnant, far past term, and the fetus had been dead for weeks. She was rushed to labor and delivery. During the attempted delivery, the chief resident realized the baby's body had begun decomposing. As he tried to assist with the birth, the infant's head began separating from the body.